Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Lucid, and I'm joined by famed Nigerian terrorist and scammer, Sai.
This is Sai, and I'm joining Lucid once again. I told him to say that as a joke, and it looks like he actually followed through. But lovely to be joining you guys once again for what might be the last calm turn before another series of furious wars.
Yes, this is the much anticipated setup turn for the much anticipated Xib and Gath war. So, if we get through this quick, we might in this same episode also jump into the actual first turn of the war. We'll just have to see how long this takes us.
Yeah, my expectation is that that first war turn is going to be like deep enough that it will probably want to give it its own episode.
Okay. Well, let's get cracking then. I'll start with a message from Tianchi, being played by Latch at the moment. Well, two of our three commanders were assassinated by Earth attack this turn, so we really did not end up with many troops in that battle, but that sort of thing is just normal at this point. Demosthenes wants to try to do an astral corruption cast before we are out, so we will see if we can hold off until we have enough slaves to make a big cast.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting. So we had kind of been looking at that battle before, and
right.
I at least hadn't been sure, like, I guess, what their plan had been, because we'd kind of been talking about how, like, they had been set up. It looked to me as though they were almost like trying to fight a different army there. But that actually explains it, that basically that they just didn't have all of the troops that they were planning on bringing.
Yeah. Yeah, if we examined it closer, we probably could have figured that out too. But what the battle that they're talking about here is this battle that Tianchi had with Erythia, where they were basically doing like this Wailing Winds, Blood Rain, and Wrathful Skies play. But their front line just kind of died too fast. But they had cool stuff. They had like Ziz, they had Wyverns, they had their Sacreds. So it was kind of clear to see the logic. It just kind of didn't work because there wasn't enough stuff.
Yeah, and now we know why there wasn't enough stuff.
Yes. This reminds me of like the learned helplessness experiment with like the dogs and like the electric metal plates. It's like they're like TNG is slowly turning into Eeyore, where it's like we got 2 out of 3 commanders assassinated this turn, but that sort of thing is normal at this point. you know,
Well, yeah, I mean, in their experience,
it
it is
is.
normal.
Yeah. Okay, pretty annoyed with all the magic phase attacks. I'm going to be consolidating the majority of my forces and mages on a single province that I dome the shit out of, and just have them position to respond to an attack on any other fort and see how that goes. Okay. You want to do the Gath messages?
Sure. So this is the last peaceful and New Year turn, and probably the correct time to talk about war plans, because this turn we are capturing another pack of DoDs, so those are the Defilers of Dreams, which means that next one will involve not only scripting huge battles, but also cleaning up after DoD capture, which is always extremely tedious. I plan to involve my both awesome teammates, and we will try to split responsibilities as we successfully did in the past. As I said before, I will cast Perpetual next turn. It should be enough to overcast any of the existing globals. That's pretty steep.
And
Uh,
that's what you were expecting, that it wouldn't be the first turn of war, but the second.
right, because that way it's disrupting logistics.
Right.
You could cast it on the first turn of war in order to basically block deep strikes, but casting it on the second turn of war is better in terms of like actually being able to capture parties if they're trying to move multiple provinces. So it's kind of the more
Yeah.
aggressive option, whereas casting on the first turn just limits how much raiding you're going to receive.
And we don't know what this war will be, but it's also very common for the first turn of war to be more exploratory than like heavily armed forces. So
Right. Um, let's
overpower
see.
any of the
Yeah,
existing globals.
yeah. The general war plan is similar to what I did against Veti, doom stacking plus raiding, but the difference is that I can hardly cast many horrors now, and mobility will be significantly harder with Perpetual. Another difference is that there are 3 fronts now, doom stacks in 53, 38, and the largest one in 218. What definitely worries me is the possibility of murdering winter / flames from the sky, even though it has a 25% chance of failing under Perpetual, and demons don't care too much. Humans do care, though, since mages and Levites are vulnerable to that even with 4 stars, and this time I can't supply every relevant mage with a shroud. Assassins, both remote and black-hearted, worry me less because scouts and sages are always there to soak those, but they will certainly be annoying too. I won't be revealing Defilers of Dreams until I have to, or someone spots them, as I said before.
It's kind of interesting. That's a pretty good use case for the sages. We might have talked about that earlier, but
Right. Once he's finished researching, then he's got all of these guys that don't have a lot to do.
Right. They're basically just pure, otherwise useless commander chaff, but, sometimes you just need a warm body to take a hit by an assassin, so.
Indeed. Another big part of the plan is killing his blood-hunting chaff in the raid phase. We have 4 raiders, mummies and Godolls, set up as thugs, and the 5th one will be our good friend the Harmonica Lumber. I think you won't be able to see those battles, unfortunately. Yes, one thing that worries me a lot is that
One question is, why is that? I was thinking, I peeked at this turn before we started today, and I couldn't figure out, would this be because they're using the actual raid command? We would see magic phase attacks.
I think he means literal raid, yes.
Okay. Huh.
Like he means raid as in, like he was, in the last message, he was talking about raiding as in, the common parlance raid of,
right.
Sending out small stacks to go take stuff. But yeah, here he's referring to the literal use of the raid command, which is very unusual.
Because he says the raid phase. Okay,
yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
okay.
The idea with that basically is that if the raiders are decent thugs and you're hitting a blood hunting province where there's not really a serious resistance in terms of stuff that can actually kill your dudes, then the actual raid can kind of clear out everything that they've got there. The only concern basically is that you have to be able to be immune to whatever the blood mages do off script, which can be leech and stuff.
What would the reason for raiding specifically be over just a normal phase attack in this case?
So the 2 things that I can think of is that it prevents movement. So if he's going to be consolidating chaff from the blood hunting provinces in order to join with an army, they most likely don't have the mage support there. So you can make a super combatant type thing that can win a battle against what's in the blood hunting province that won't be able to beat those same guys if they have proper mage support. So for example, if you're patrolling with storm demons, you might just be doing that because you happen to have storm demons without any real expectation that they're going to be fighting in that province alone. Because the raid phase goes first, outside of magic phase movement into that province, they're not going to have the mage support that they need to actually function.
Oh, okay. I think I forgot that the raid phase was before normal phase. But,
right, so it's got that, and then the other advantage, I guess, of the raid phase movement is that you're doing it outside of being able to disrupt the stuff that's there. It's basically the same idea, just blocking reinforcements from there. So if you're moving your blood mages out to go do leech spam in some other critical battle, then they're going to get gem burned before they can actually join the fight.
I think you might not know this. I think they changed raid phase mechanics in Dominion 6.
Okay.
I think it doesn't exist anymore. I know they changed it. I can't remember what the change was, but I think it's now just considered I don't think it's a separate or somehow they've changed it drastically, because I think I actually posted something about it at some point where I was talking about how buggy it was, and I didn't even know all the bugs. Some of the bugs were just stuff Arco had figured out, but
yeah, the other thing is that even without explicit bugs, it's very, very annoying to play around just because it is, an extra phase. And given that gem burning is already such a big part of, or I should say such a controversial part of the game strategy already, it makes total sense that you would want to mitigate that
eliminate
as much as
a phase.
Yeah, given that Illwinter doesn't seem to like the magic phase shenanigans. That's not something that they think is cool and interesting.
You know what, by the way, and there's a chance Illwinter's watching this, but I think one of the best solutions to gem burning as a mechanic, and maybe it's a game option that gets enabled, is when you use gems that for all subsequent phases of that turn, those gems are turned into temp gems so that they'll evaporate basically by the end of your turn.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I think that something... Sorry, I think you cut off for a second.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So what I was going to say is your mod kind of addresses this with temp gems. And I think that that's kind of the right approach, right? Because temp gems in general are just a good way of working around the, any sort of multi-phase nonsense, because a big part of why this thing is so effective is exactly that, right? That you have too many phases and you can't guard against all of them.
Right. But yeah, I mean, if just casual gem use gave you temp gems for the remaining, if you used 3 gems on fire elementals in the magic phase, then you also got to use those same 3 gems for fire elementals in the normal phase. That would be really cool, I think. I don't think there would be anybody that would complain about that.
I don't know. You can find people to complain about everything, but you're right. That would be
that's the rule of the internet. I don't know why I was so stupid and just said that.
But no, you're right. That would be a pretty reasonable way of doing this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we're here at the PS. One thing.
One thing that worries me a lot is that I caught 5 harpies last turn, and thus it is possible that I'll catch one in number 249 this turn, which will be a complete disaster. I'm 100% sure that no normal scout can sneak into 249, but harpies are almost impossible to control. I made Pan a favor by agreeing to stop blood sacking in certain places, and tried to talk him out of spying on me for a while with some shaky but sensible reasoning. I also let him know that safe passage through my lands into Shabala, since that is what he wants according to his words, may or may not be true. That won't work for too long, but with perpetual, harpies should be a lot easier to control. Postscript. Erythia apparently started caring about unrest in the DoD parking lot and brought skeletons in, so I'm moving them to his another throne in number 178, and next turn I will probably park them in one of Shabalban's thrones. Postscript. Pan buys Maceman mercs with 4 dudes remaining. Must be swimming in gold?
Wait, I don't understand this one bit. Let's look at 178. Why would he put his DoDs in someone else's throne?
Oh, he just doesn't want the unrest himself.
But why? If you have 0 population, you can't have unrest.
I don't know. That seemed to be his reasoning.
Okay, Maven, put in the comments what's going on, dog. Like, because the guys, it can't really be logistics because they can move anywhere on the map any turn they want to. Presumably you're trying to be friendly with Erythia and Pan. I remember Warp PC at some point put in the game comment. I mean, like in the I don't know, in some of the Discord thread somewhere that they had like huge, like 400 unrest, like we see here in this throne in one of their provinces, and they figured out that there were some DoDs. But I can't understand why you would do it.
Yeah, that is interesting. The only thing that I could think of is that like he's actually trying to cause problems with them. That like he has them, he may as well use them to be harmful. But that sort of goes against the whole like subtlety factor.
Right. Yeah. And I don't understand. I mean, maybe it's so that they can't get patrolled out later. Like if there's a ton of unrest in the throne, it's going to be harder to patrol them out when it's time for him to throne rush. That's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, that's
feasible.
Let
me see if we can find a Pan throne that had. Where are Pan's thrones? Gath and where's Pan? Pan. 17 unrest, 0, 2. Yeah, I don't know. I think that Pan must have gotten the unrest out of it, or maybe it hasn't happened yet. But okay, there's a lot of this was the fort that he must have had them at before, and you can see there's a ton of unrest. He was talking about Erythia was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Yeah.
So he almost got caught just playing around, it seems.
Right, because there's also a bunch of long dead, which are what you use to patrol out DoDs because they're invisible, and you need stuff with spirit sight.
Yeah, and when you... So yeah, I think that your idea of like trying to prepare the throne for like later stealth action makes sense. But even then, it's kind of giving away that you're looking at that if that's what you're aiming for. So yeah, it is curious.
It's very, very strange. But Gath so far hasn't done anything without kind of thinking about it,
Yeah, he's had good reasoning behind what he's been doing so far. So
right.
We should expect
Pan buys 4 Maceman mercs with 4 dudes remaining. Must be swimming in gold.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Maybe he wasn't looking. This must be the Sun and Kindred. These are the Macemen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he might have just been rebidding them automatically, like the mercenaries buy mercenaries.
Yeah. But he doesn't have Gift of Nature's Bounty or anything. So he must... And he's got forts. So, I mean... He must really be struggling to spend gold.
Yeah. I mean, when you're sitting at like nigh infinite levels of income, then it's pretty easy to just kind of have gold lying around. Especially like with the way that he's been playing, like he's been very conservative in terms of like what he's spending things on in terms of permanent troops. Like he basically buys just enough for what he needs for his armies and is basically just been fighting with wizards this whole time.
Yeah. Okay. We get more... Oh god, these guys get wrecked. This is such a good spell. Ghost Riders.
Yeah. It's really efficient too, which is I think the big part.
Yeah, it's really just a check on if you have high enough death mages. Otherwise, it's probably one of the best gym sinks. Look at Stealing Soul Torn. Wait, was this Pangea attacked independent? So these are permanent.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's similar to like how the horror cult can give you permanent real horrors. The minor events that give you those dudes can also be pretty valuable for getting just like these decent units with. I think Sultans have armor negating attacks.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Are these?
Yeah, armor negating.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so those guys
Oh,
are
wait.
really nasty.
But this part isn't armor negating. The soul rendering claw. But then the soul rend part is, what does this do? 0 armor negating damage. So I guess this is just a DRN roll that adds harm mark.
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of weird. But, they do have magic power and pretty good attack and strength and regen.
Yeah, so one of the things about Soul Torn that's kind of interesting is that certain types of thugs that are just like extremely resilient normally can get whittled down by that sort of armor negating damage if they don't have like, decent HP and regen.
Yeah, I think the best thing about like when you're casting Sin Lesser Horror, which is normally the way you see them, is you usually get a lot of them.
Right.
That's kind of the nice thing about Soul Torn. But yeah, I mean, I don't ever really remember getting Soul Torn from Sin Lesser Horror and being disappointed. That's normally a role I like. But
yeah,
looking at them here as an individual unit, I'm like, not amazing. But in mass, they're quite nice. And then he's got 2 of the commanders, so that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, and he's definitely going to be able to mass them.
Okay. Now look. Oh, go
like,
ahead.
What I mean is that like he's definitely going to be able to deploy them in situations where they're going to be relevant.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly units that would enjoy some point buffs too, which is something Centaur Sages can do quite well, and they're worthy of it, I think. Could we have so this is where it looks like they've switched back to underwater here, so they're alternating back and forth.
Yeah, he'd mentioned that they were going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's just scouting.
And stealing thralls. And then this looks like a PD dump that TNG's attacking into. With griffins.
Yeah, the griffins all died, but it seems like they basically just bought time in order for the vampire thug to get his spells off.
Yeah.
That's still very dangerous just because of the crossbows, but it looks like it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, with invulnerability, and pierce resistance, they're pretty tough. And then on top of that, they've got armor of the 5 elements. But I think it depends too. Like, he's probably relying a lot on Soul Vortex, and he got a lot of afflictions. So like if you land on like the periphery where you're not getting a lot of Soul Vortex, I could see that failing.
Yeah, because like you saw how that guy's hit points dropped. It's just that he's able to get them right back up because he was surrounded by other dudes. The other thing that was kind of funny there is that you saw the HP route thing happen, where because he's immortal, he's staying in the fight.
Right. Yeah. I don't really understand bringing the griffins. I don't think you need them. I think you just cast it. Like, you're not going to get killed by crossbows at the first couple turns, I don't think. You just turn 1, cast invulnerability.
Yeah, that is curious. I think that he thought that he needed to be able to get his buffs off.
Yeah, maybe he was thinking like, hey, what if I run into another lich or a vampire or something? Those griffins would have killed like another thug, but they're not going to do well against PD.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Okay, we haven't. So TNG had told us in their message that they were moving out a Doomstack that could defend adjacent forts. So they moved the Doomstack here, I guess anticipating an attack. And from here, they can defend all of their forts. But it doesn't look like they accomplished anything. Like, this fort never got attacked. So it's pretty unclear what's going to happen next.
Yeah, it's also curious because like Doomstack is definitely a relative term, and if Pan is like still deeply engaged in this war, then we might be seeing some more of those vortex of returning shenanigans and similar in order to beat down that army, or even just something as simple as a double rigger play. Like making any sort of like super Doomstack when you're in this sort of like kind of precarious situation feels very risky.
Okay, so let's spend the rest of this turn looking at army positioning, and let's start with Pangea, because last turn, Pangea's main army, like all these sages were right here. And it was looking like they were thinking, hey, maybe we're going to finish off TNG. But from all the movement we can see with Arithia moving here, basically cutting them off, but also with Pan's stuff pulling back, it looks like it's pretty clear that basically it was communicated that Erythia gets Tianqi's cap, and Pan has.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Erythia is probably one of the handful of players for which the Doom stack can actually be, a Doom stack.
Right. And so Tianqi, not Tianqi, Pangaea, let's look where they're pulling their forces to. So the Centaur Sages, which were here, have pulled back to here. There's a small squad over here just dealing with Vedheim raiding. But this also might be, like, one of the plays Pangaea could make is if they, because there's some weird part of Gath's message where Pangaea indicated they wanted a path to Xibalba through Gath's lands. But another way to do that is just come in here and finish off Vedheim, and then you have a much bigger border with Xibalba.
Yeah, that might actually be more feasible as well, because Pangaea is actually one of the better nations at fighting against Vedheim, just because they can very casually bring out gift spam and not feel bad if that doesn't work. If Gath were to bring out gift spam in order to try to finish off Vedheim and then loses that stack, that's irreplaceable, right? Because they just don't have that many Earth Astral Mages. Pan does, so they actually can try to do that and just try to brute force down the capital, and then if it doesn't work, be like, okay, well, we tried, and then do something else without it ending their game.
So that's sort of what I'm expecting, is that this stack right here, I'm expecting they move over here and he tries to make a play at finishing off Vedheim, perhaps.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Maybe these guys move this way. If we look at where's the rest of the Pangaean troops, we see a lot of Harpies, which I think are mostly blood hunter, blood patrolling chaff.
Well, he had also been using a bunch of those as siege chaff on.
Right.
So, and given how quickly they fly, they might have just been cruising out from that. They're also something that it's kind of worth building up a decent amount of, just in order to have that siege chaff ready.
Then Harpies up here. Okay, this is probably the biggest Pangaean buildup. And you can see here there's a ton of thralls. So this is kind of the Pan blood hunting operation going on. And a lot of their troops. This is probably the majority of the Pangaean troops. And this is primarily on the Gath front, though this army could also be positioned to take this from Erythia. And then this area is pretty sparsely populated. Where's Pangaea on this army supply graph? They are very low.
That is interesting, given how much chaff they have. But on the other hand, they're also kind of the smallest blood hunting nation that, you could even say is doing blood hunting. So that's probably why the chaff graph looks like that. Shabala and Gath have both needed to constantly pump out patrollers in a way that Pan just doesn't need to.
But the thing about this, though, is that the majority of the non-Sage armies that we see, there's some Centaur Cataphracts, but most of the things seem to be Harpies and Thralls. And that's probably this much of their army graph. Harpies and Thralls. And I mean, this is something you and I have been saying for 50 turns, and we were kind of wrong about it, right? Because he stomped the crap out of Tianqi without an army, but he might need an army now.
He might not. I mean, we were wrong before. He'll definitely need some bodyguards in order to help defend against the Hars. You basically need to build yourself some sort of hug box for that. But outside of that, I mean, he's been doing pretty well with his Sage spam, and I expect him to keep trying to make that work.
Yeah, but I don't see enough Sages. Where's the next 150 Sages? Let's look at this. I mean, maybe they're here. There's probably 150, 200 Sages in this area. But I think you're fighting into Deep Pockets Gath. Gath can drop 4 or 5 flames from the sky. They finished research. Gath has fire mages, if memory serves. Don't these guys come in fire randoms? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gath can drop 4 or 5 flames from the sky. I don't think you can do... if Pan puts together 200 mages that he might need to win a fight, Gath can just kill him, and then Pan's basically forsaken all of this territory. I think the interesting thing, the 300 IQ play, is if Pan gets themselves into a war with either Gath or Xibalba, and then literally steals all of their troops.
I mean, that would be challenge. But enslave spam, if it's done right, especially with Perpetual Storm, you can grab a bunch of Ocelotls, for example.
But I was thinking Master Enslave followed by Enslave spam, but yeah. Just like what if they do Arcane Nexus and then they have like 5 or 6 Master and Slave casters with pin gear?
Yeah, it's fun to imagine, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very big investment, and it also comes with its risks, right? Because it means that you are facing into an army of a bunch of troops, and you can very easily just like lose your dudes when you're trying to do that.
Right. I guess the thing that's interesting to me about it is I'm trying to puzzle out a way like how does Pan get a high quality army? And like because
And
I think they need it, and I'm like maybe that's the plan. Like
maybe they
maybe they
steal
just
it.
maybe they steal it. Can I has that please?
Yeah, my issue with that is basically just the high risk, right? Because you have to bring
Yeah.
enough mages and investment in order to make that work, and that of course means that you can lose all of those dudes.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do offensively because, like against Pan, there's going to be Defiler of Dream Assassins. I mean, not Pan, against Gath. You want to make sure your guys with gear don't get killed by flames from the sky, so that's even more gear you put on them. It's easy to get gym baited when you're doing things offensively, Like there's a bunch of. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, a lot of ways that could go wrong.
Yeah. And it's like once people know that you're trying to do master and slave spam, then they can just gym bait you, and every time they gym bait you, it's like minus like 50 pearls.
Yeah,
They
that's
can
not
gym bait you like 4
that's not
times a turn.
yeah. I was gonna say that's not something that you can fail to do too many times.
Right. And that's interesting because we were talking about gym baiting earlier, and gym baiting is part, I mean, like it or not, it's part of the current balance meta of the game, right? Like some things like elemental spam, other kinds of like high gym combat spell spam is countered by gym baiting. So, you know. Oh. All right. I think we've okay, so that's the Pan troop buildup. Let's talk maybe Gath troop buildup.
Yeah, so Gath did actually lay out where his armies were going to be, and in our case, we can
Where do you
also
want me to start?
let's just go read his message. Actually, I didn't remember the problems numbers. Okay, so 53, 38, and 218.
Oh God.
Okay, so that's okay. We can see a couple uniques in there on both sides, even.
Yeah.
So that looks like it's the Doom stack that he had against Vedheim, essentially. Yes. So we also should expect that army to have a large number of crystal mages.
Dear God.
So yeah,
That is a big army. That's a lot of Shed and Seir.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing though is that it's not just relying on those to win. It also has just like a huge amount of mage support in order to like deal direct damage that way, which is also very impressive.
How vulnerable are Shed versus Flames from the Sky?
They have decent base hit points. They're actually more resilient than Storm Demons.
Okay. Because Storm Demons are vulnerable to it. I think Storm Demons have like, what, 28 or something hit points?
Yeah, Storm Demon
so I think
is 20.
2 hits will kind of kill them.
Storm Demon is only
20.
20 base, yeah. With the Shed,
okay.
it's 40, so they're literally double the base HP.
Okay. So they're going to be pretty tough to kill with Flames from the Sky. You have to hit them like at least 3 times, I think.
Yeah, you have to hit them often.
Yeah. So that's like probably you need to cast it 6 times. Yeah. Which I have seen done. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, it's one of the things.
I think it was Sakane did it one time or something. There's some army of like demons like this, and somebody like rolled up with this huge doom stack and he hit it with like 6 flames from the sky. It was like goodbye.
Yeah, if you need to, you can, but it's very, very expensive, right? And you also just need to have everything ready ahead of time in order to actually take advantage of that opportunity.
Right. But yeah, this is a scary ass army. Holy shit. Storm demons too. In this region, so this is interesting because this is the Vedheim region basically, and this stuff that Zabalba has here, was like presumably maybe to deal with Vedheim, but he's going to need literally all of it just to deal with this one army, and then Gath has another army right here in 38. Like this is another very spooky army.
Yeah, so we can see that one also has at least one unique, right? It's got the Ice Devil there. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And then that also has those Kohen Gadols. So I think that at least some of those guys are going to be doing raid phase stuff. which is going to make it very challenging to combine guys that are patrolling on that fort on the border with the reinforcements that are going to be coming in.
Yeah. Was this one of the ones they mentioned? 38? Yeah.
Yeah.
5338, and the other one is 218.
218 being the largest one. Yeah, because that's the one closest to Xibalba's capital. So it makes sense that that's going to be the one with the biggest investment. So we're seeing multiple...
940. Oh my god. That's a
so
lot.
you can bet that those guys are going to be on a dome.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, okay, so Lord of Corruption and Lord of Hell. Yeah, so he has multiple Blood 9 summons in there in order to support that army, which makes sense. You need it.
Yeah.
They're worth it.
So is there a throne that this army can go after? I don't think so, unless they go for an Erythian throne. I think this is meant to just kind of come down here. And maybe it's meant to take Droman, and then later to take Xibalba.
Yeah, I actually think that that's like a headshot army, like go for Xibalba's capital, because typically you have at least a fair amount of like your expensive, nice things in terms of like, smithing and so on concentrated in your capital. And while fair amounts of that can be moved, especially for Xibalba where they've got, everything flying and so on, you, you can see Pretender guys there right now. So like if you want to hunt them down and take out globals and stuff, that's a good place to start. If you can get away with it, of course, right? Because typically there's also commensurate defenses in the capital as well.
The other thing they may go for, we're not sure, is they could go for this Sacrificial Grove, which is a, kind of the cornerstone of this is the most valuable province for Xibalba. And also, clearly a province that Xibalba is willing to defend. There's 900, or basically 900 units here between Aussies and Dark Vines and Beast Bats. Yeah. So... And this might be the arena we get the best fight if these two armies square off.
Yeah, and I could definitely see that being something that Gath is cognizant about focusing on as well. Because, they're aware that Xibalba has this discount site. And by now they should have been scrying around a fair bit. So they most likely know that that's where it is as well.
Yeah. Now, if we look at Xibalba has a big army here. They've got a ton of blood hunting operations, which have things like beast bats and corpse constructs. But in terms of major Aussie Doom stacks, there's one here, there's one here, there's basically a combined one here, and then there's one on the TNC front. So this TNC front army could come down here and maybe deal with this army. These guys could combine and maybe deal with this. I think actually Xibalba has one more army than Gath of equal demon size. Because I think if you combine all these guys, you get basically a commensurate amount of this. I think if this army and some of maybe the other stuff around here combine, you get a commensurate army to this. And then this army matches this one. And then I think this army is basically free. Maybe it would have to deal with like that or something, or maybe these guys. Well, no, maybe it's even. These guys maybe match up to this.
Yeah, it's interesting that we'd been kind of talking about, like how saving the Perpetual Storm until after the war has started is able to cut off guys after they're attacking. But one of the things that we kind of haven't talked about is that if Xibalba doesn't have this stuff already on the border of Gath, then casting it on the opening turn of the war might actually stop a bunch of that stuff from moving. Because presumably at least the Aussies in 123 are going to be making multi-turn movements.
Yeah, I mean, it could just render the Xibalban stuff, like here in 95, like these guys are way out of position, because Gath could just jump on top of two of these forts and one turn pop them. And especially if Gath does deep raiding, where he's basically blocked off all of the provinces around these two forts. And Xibalba might be thinking like, oh, I can 2-province move on to defending either of these. If he has Perpetual Storm up and has blocked off one province around each of these forts, that's it. He gets these forts unless there's some magic phase movement in to defend it.
Yeah, I will say though that I think that they're both not going to want to go super all in on the first turn of the war.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I can actually kind of understand wanting to, and the other thing is like at the very beginning, we'd kind of, or I at least had kind of intuitively thought that waiting until after the initial phase of the war is also like the one that has the more potential upside, right? Because that's the one where you can actually catch people out and then catch their armies. So I'm still expecting Gath's move to pay off of like waiting. I'm sure that he's going to catch out at least one of those.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah.
Duders.
I think we're also just at the phase in the game where you could never count on the Aussies being able to fly ever. Not only just Perpetual Storm, but against like a high-end player like Gath, and this late in the game, there's always going to be a Storm Staff. So, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how these army, like how Xibalba scripts this, how all this plays out. Because how I got on that train of thought was like, okay, well, like the turn Perpetual Storm gets cast, like that's going to be like really surprising and bad for Xibalba. But then it's like Xibalba must, not only has Xibalba heard through the grapevine that like Perpetual Storm might go up, but like I think at this phase in the game, you just assume your Aussies are never going to fly.
Right, but you do care about in terms of it, like
the strategic,
the strategic movement. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
casting Perpetual Storm first basically blocks off a huge number of Ocelotls in that one province on Pangea's board. I think it was 123.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there's probably a couple other cases like that where you can expect that he's still kind of getting into position, and being able to disrupt like that is just huge.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're ready now to go look at the next turn and see what actually happens.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think so. So, I mean, I assume that your viewers are going to have to wait.
But... Yep, you guys are going to have to wait, but for Sai and I, we're going to go just take a look at it. So we'll see you guys in the next one.
YouTube, see you then.
Cheers.